Hello, my name is Adrian. I'm part of team number 6, and we're about to present the case Johannes Bandes Bosch sends an email. First of all, the case presents us with the Big Five firm, who is an international firm with offices in Mexico and the Netherlands, which gives services of financial reports to international customers. One of them is Smith Jones, a British client who is upset because his work has not been finished on the time. Mr. Van den Bosch is the responsible for the Netherlands teams and the one in charge of the customer service with the client Smith Jones. He sends an email to Mr. Menendez, the person in charge of the Mexico team and in charge of the work of this client. In the email, Mr. Van den Bosch tells him about the situation with the client. He also asks why the work has not been delivered and he attached a plan to get it done. He is attaching a possible solution. As a response for the email, Mr. Menendez was upset because he thinks Netherlands was passing the ball to the Mexican team. That means they are blaming them. He replies that they were instructed not to work with any customers until local management give the authorization to do it. And he also tells him that it's supposedly Mr. Van den Bosch should know about this. He didn't answer the plan. He didn't give a status of the client report. So Mr. Van den Bosch don't have an answer of his report. And at the end, Mr. Menendez thinks it was a rude email. Mr. Van den Bosch does not understand why Mr. Menendez thinks he was rude. He actually looked for advice with some colleagues, a Belgian and a Dutch colleague. He printed the email and tells him if they can see maybe a word that could get upset to Mr. Menendez. Both of them agree that it was a good email because he was sticking to the facts. He was pointing the things that are true, and there was no moment where there was a rude attitude from Mr. Van den Bosch. At the end, Mr. Van den Bosch is worried because he has no answer for the client and he has a problem with the person responsible of do the work for this client.
So thank you for this brief summary. Now, before answering all the questions of the mini case, we would like to present and describe the culture which are involved in this case. So let's begin with the Dutch culture. We chose to describe it thanks to the 6 Hofstede dimensions and thanks to globe. So let's begin with the 6th dimension of Hofstede. The first one is power distance. Thanks to this graphic, we can see that they have a low score in power distance, 38. They are independent people. They want to have equal rights. The superiors are very accessible. For example, they call them by their first name. And as a result, the superiors give much more responsibility to their employee. Let's continue with individualism. We can say that the Dutch culture is very individualist, thanks to the high score of 80. They have a preference for loosely knit social framework, and they are expected to take care of themselves and their family mainly. Relationships in business are based on mutual advantage. Moreover, it is a meritocracy, which means that promotion and hiring depends only on merits. Then, let's talk about masculinity. There are a very low score in masculinity, which means that it's more likely a feminine society. In fact, they give a lot of credit and a lot of importance about work-life balance. They want solidarity at work. It's very important for them. And when they have a problem, they prefer to use negotiation, consensus to solve it. Then we have uncertainty avoidance. We can see with this middle score, which is 53 that they have a slightly preference to control the future and to avoid uncertainty avoidance. They have an emotional need for rules. They think that time is money. They work hard, they are very punctual and give a lot of credit to safety. Then, for the two last dimensions, they have a high score, 67 and 68. For long-term orientation, Netherlands has a pragmatic nature, which means that the truth depends mostly about the context, the situation. They give lots of credit to time. It's important for them to have a little bit of change. They are open to change, they are open to innovation, and they really want to encourage the economy by investing and saving a lot of money. The last one is indulgence. With indulgence, we can see that they are very optimistic and positive. They want to succeed in their dreams, they want to realize their desires, they want to have fun. They want to have free time, and they want to do what they want when they want. Let's talk then with the description of the Dutch culture with the globe dimension. So with this graphic, which is very easy to understand, we can see that, for example, they are relatively high in performance orientation, but in the human orientation, they are quite medium, nearly low. And we have approximately the same graphic for leadership visualization. In this graphic, we can see that they are very charismatic and very participative, but on the contrary, they are not at all, mainly not self-protective or autonomous. So that's it for the Dutch culture, and let's talk about now the Mexican culture.
Hello, my name is Sandra Salvago, and now I'm going to be presenting you the Hofstede dimensions in Mexico. First, we have power distance. In Mexico, it's a hierarchical system, and people accept this kind of society. They are a very centralized country, and subordinates expect what to be told, and also employees expect that their bosses always tell them what they need to attempt for every situation in the business and what they need to achieve by the end of the day. We have a score of 81, which means that it's a high power distance. For our second dimension, we have individualism, which we have a 30 score. And in this specific one, Mexico is a collectivist country. They are very united. Tradition is very important in this society. Loyalty is paramount, is at the top of it. And long-term commitment, family or extended relationships are very important. We as Mexicans use family and have our family in top number one, or relationships that we have for a long time. And lastly, hiring and promotion in the business area. Decisions take account on the employees in groups. So everybody decides as a collective group what decisions will be made in the business area or for the company or for any other decisions that need to be made. Lastly, in this slide, we have the masculinity dimension, which we can see that it's pretty high, it's 69. In Mexico, we have a very masculine society. In most of the areas of our governments, of our rulers, masculinity always is at the top, and that's a thing that has been changing lastly. We as women have raised our voices and want more power and equity among salaries, among the treatment that we have in the business area, and in everything that we have as rights. But right now, masculinity society means that managers are expected to be decisive and assertive, and competition and performance are resolved by fighting them out. Next, we have our other 3 dimensions, which are uncertainty avoidance. We can see that in Mexico we have a score of 82, which means that is a high preference for avoiding uncertainty, and it means that we maintain our codes of belief and behavior, and we are very emotional for the need of rules. This means that we as Mexicans always want to know what's happening and what are we going to do tomorrow, at the end of the week, or next month, because we have to be sure of what will hold in the future. Secondly, we have long-term orientation, which we have a score of 24. It is very low. Mexican culture is normative. People have a strong concern in establishing the absolute truth. We are a very honest society, and great respect for traditions and small propensity to save for the future. So we may be not that good on money in saving for the future, but we always want to respect our traditions, and no matter what, traditions come first as family in the other dimensions. Lastly, we have indulgence, a score of 97, which is very, very high, and we have a tendency towards indulgence, realize our impulses with enjoying life and having fun. We as Mexicans, I think that it's a culture that always has very strong the adjective of happiness, and we always try to seek the most good for the most persons, or at least try to take out the most good even in bad situations. Lastly, we put here some graphs that help us also describe the culture visualization of Mexico, and we have other types of indicators such as assertiveness, performance orientation, human orientation, in-group collectivism, power distance, and uncertainty avoidance. We also wanted to describe the leadership visualization that we can be used in any of the business area or companies, or like this subject in human resource management, and these terms such as charismatic, leadership, team-oriented, participative, human-oriented, autonomous, and self-proactive. So here we can see the country score and the range of scores in others. So we go from greatly inhibits to contributes greatly. So that's it from my part. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this part. Now we're going to go to the next person.
So our first question about our mini case was about the situation of Mr. Smith-Jones. Who is Mr. Smith-Jones? Mr. Smith-Jones is a British client who pays for a service. After several weeks, he didn't see any progress in his service, who is paying for. So for us, it is reasonable to be upset, because it came from a British culture. And in a British culture, when you pay for something, for a service, for a project, or anything, you want it now or on time. And then, no progress. Moreover, it contacts the Rotterdam's company, which has, in this issue, the same point of view. That's why the Rotterdam company take action. In this situation, the side who should take responsibility is Rotterdam management team. In fact, the British client was in contact with them. They should have learned about the Mexican culture. They should have done a lot of things to be informed with the practice in this country. So the responsibility is to Rotterdam management team due to the fact that they established a due date and made commitment to the Mexican team.
Hello everyone, I'm Clément and I'm here to talk about Mr. Van den Bosch situation and its email. So then I'm going to talk about what could have been done differently. So here about this email, there is a lot of problem in the email of Mr. Van den Bosch and its situation. First, he is only concerned to be accounted responsible for the delay and the lack of progress. So he is only thinking about its interests. So this is one of the major problems, because all the purpose of his email is biased. Then we need to talk about the facts. He said that he's going to use the facts to tell Pablo Menendez that he's wrong. But there is a problem here, because he only thinks about the facts that suits him. So here it is all so biased because he don't have the vision of the Mexican staff. So what is the main problem of is what is provocate all these consequences? It's the ethnocentric vision of Mr. Van den Bosch and the ethnocentric staffing of the company. So here, Mr. Van den Bosch is not aware of the culture of Mexican employees. So he is only thinking about his culture, the Dutch culture, and the British culture. So it is a major problem because there is not any good form of communication here. Then we can say that Dutch and British are European culture, so they have more or less the same way to do business. So there is a problem here because the client is not aware that it is a Mexican employee that is going to do the work, so maybe there is going to be some differences. So the lack of communication, the lack of awareness of the other cultures provocates an email that is too aggressive, that is not asking for a solution but only pointing facts that's suiting Mr. Van den Bosch. So this email is not ethno-relative. So then what you have done anything differently? So Mr. Van den Bosch is too aggressive, as I said before, so he needs to cool off, to calm down, and to be more aware that he's working with another people and to be more team spirit. The emails is too focused about the facts that suits Mr. Van den Bosch, so he needs to ask him what is going on, to ask him if they need help, if something has been not understood, but not blaming directly Pablo Menendez because he's running away from his responsibilities and it's not good for the work. Something that can be worked on is the ethnocentric staffing of the company, which result in the ethnocentric vision of Mr. Van den Bosch. So we can do formation, training, so that all the employees are aware of the culture of each employee and know that there can be differences. For example, Pablo Menendez need to be aware that there is a European vision of working and maybe some delays are different. And at the opposite, Mr. Van den Bosch need to understand that everything is not doing the same manner as in Europe. So this is one way the company can really improve. Then in the communication, maybe if Mr. Van den Bosch have told the client that Mexican division will handle its case, maybe a lot of things could have been different. So maybe more communication between employees could have been really necessary. And then to conclude with this part, the major thing that could really improve in this case is to handle the internationalization of the firm, to understand that there is a local management, there is also headquarters, so they need to figure out a manner of management that is more cooperative, with more communication, so that everyone can easily understand how each business is going to be handled. So thank you very much, and feel free to ask us any question on this part. I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Now, what should Van den Bosch do now? First of all, we recommend that he should apologize with the client and inform that they are taking action to finish as soon as possible. Then, reply to Mr. Menendez that it was all a misunderstanding and making him clear he's not blaming Mexico. It's really important because as the Mexican culture, they are based in relationship. He needs to get clear to Mr. Menendez that it was just a misunderstanding and he wants to build a relationship in order to have more work done in future. He also should ask for his help. Tell Mr. Menendez he's needed in order to accomplish the project, and tells him also that he will talk to local management and ask him what else does he need after local management gives them the authorization. As soon as Mr. Van der Bosch has a due date, inform the client. Continue contacting Mr. Menendez and ask if he can do something to improve time. He needs to keep in touch with Mr. Menendez and tell him that if he needs something, he'll be right there and offering the help he needs in order to finish. At the end, thank Mr. Menendez and reaffirm it was all a misunderstood and the problem they had. For the next project, tell him they must improve communications so they can work as a team. It's really important to maintain a good relationship with Mr. Menendez because of the Mexican culture, and also he needs to, Mr. Van der Bosch should be continuing in touch with Mr. Menendez in all the next projects, looking for time, due date, for timelines, in order to have all the next projects done properly.